Awesome. Hello, everyone. I'm Ben, and the president co-founder of Octane. I'm going to be your host this week for the community meetup. I'm joined by two amazing guests who I'm going to introduce in a little bit. I'm just going to talk for a couple minutes, and I'm going to have a special guest appearance by one of our agency partner managers to talk, since we have one of our absolute best agencies, period. Perhaps your best in Europe. And we have the man who helps run EMEA agencies here as well over at Klaviyo. So maybe what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to talk a couple minutes, because I kind of thought, because this is a European edition and a European episode, that I would actually talk a little bit about not like how you use your party, because I feel like we covered that a lot, but how that might play out over the next couple of years. So I actually did a talk recently for a European data privacy conference in Lithuania. Did not fly to Lithuania, anyone, although that would have been cool. But I did a talk, and I talked about like some of my thoughts and like what was going to happen in the future. And I thought I would share a little bit of that for everyone. And then I think after that, I want to hop into some of the amazing stuff that that the Phils are doing with zero party data. This is the Phils episode. So if anyone has a fee for an episode, anyone has other suggestions, please let me know. So I'm going to start by just talking a little bit about all the fun of zero party data. Look, oh, bam. See, I can make things like appear like this. And in fact, actually, if I share my screen, I can appear like that using all that Zoom magic that we're talking about. So just a quick reminder, for those who don't know me, I'm Ben. I'm president and co-founder of Octane AI. So I'm just I usually wear funny hats at conferences and run around. But in a previous life, I was a journalist. I was the editor of the tech news website Mashable. I also sit on the board of a foundation called the Lila Jenna Foundation. And I wrote a best-selling book for HarperCollins called Captivology on the science and psychology of attention. It even has my face on it. So if you ever want an extra book read, you can go and grab that one. But what I like to talk about all day, and probably a lot of you, is the zero party data marketing side. But the implications, I think, are like really important over the next couple of years for everyone. Kind of like to think about how you think about the future of your business, not just like what the present is, because we've done a lot in the last couple of weeks about like how you implement like the zero party data piece, and we're going to be talking a lot more about that. But I want to kind of like talk about the future, why you're doing this, like what's kind of the things I'm seeing. And this is like something that I did a lot of a lot of thinking for my European data privacy conference. So a little bit about how zero party data is transforming business. So looking into my future crystal ball here, and feel free if you have thoughts and you have predictions, put them in the chat, or if you have questions, put them in the chat. I want to make this interactive. So the impact of data transformation, I had kind of 4 key points that I gave to this group of lawyers and politicians in the data privacy world. And so one, I told them that the platforms have more data privacy power than governments. So, especially for our European crew here today, there's a lot of European laws, GDPR, all of that. But what really changed everything from direct data tracking to zero party data, it wasn't really GDPR as much as it was a single change from Apple and upcoming changes from Google. And so probably many of you know, and if you don't, third-party cookies will eventually go away. And government had a role to pressure, but really the platforms themselves are really making the changes and the moves. Why is Facebook really getting impacted? It's not because of European data privacy changes. It's really because of what's happened by Apple deciding to make it so that you could opt out of data tracking. And so the results of all this is that small businesses are definitely feeling more of the pinch from data privacy changes than big businesses. And so this is a graph from one of our other amazing partners, where they found that that the return on ad spend dropped by over 20% from 2020 to 2021, but it was an even bigger amount after the iOS 14.5 release. So probably some of you have seen a big drop over your ad spend. I can see some nodding for those who have their camera on. And this is a more pronounced impact on smaller brands, on startups. And it's in part because bigger brands have more sources of data, have more capital, and have other sources of getting customers. they've spent a decade or 5 decades in some cases or more, building up like their different traffic. But more than anything, they have a deep data set already. And this is like why we're talking about zero party data, to build up your own data set. So you don't have to rely on like the Facebook data set. This is kind of like what the graph is looking at. You can see how return on ad spend really dropped, compared from the beginning of this year versus the beginning of last year. It's a remarkable difference. And, I'm happy to talk about this with like all of your friends. If you've seen this, I would love to hear, like, if you've had an issue or if you haven't had an issue, I'd love to hear about that too. But it's not even like the super small brands. There are some bigger brands, like Peloton is like an example of a brand that was really impacted by it. You've probably seen them in the news too. So no one is actually fully immune. But the more data that you have, the more differentiation you have, the better. We're going to talk all about that in a few minutes. 3, the like big player that's traditionally driven traffic to all our e-commerce brands, Meta/Facebook. Over the first couple months after the data privacy changes happened, I heard a lot of brands tell me, yeah, like, we're just going to wait out and like, see if like recovers. Facebook will figure it out. But Facebook really hasn't figured it out. It's like, it may never fully recover, right? And so like, I actually wrote about this years ago, where like the reason why Facebook acquired Oculus years ago was so that it could actually have its own like physical hardware platform to avoid what happened last year, where Apple, made it so that Facebook had a lot less data. And so Facebook knew for years that this would happen, but they couldn't actually really do anything. They tried to like buy new platforms. They tried to build smartphones, but, the platforms, Google and Apple particularly, since they own the majority of the smartphone market, have the real control over this. And so this is Facebook's stock price after that, as you all know. And that's like probably going to be a more permanent impact. And so that means that we all as marketers have to make a more permanent change, which is where we talk about the zero party data place, and Facebook's worst fears came true. And last one, I really believe, and this is like what we're really going to dive into, the most successful brands of the 2020s are going to be zero party data businesses. They're going to be businesses that rely on their own data for their own segmentation, their own targeting, their own marketing to, customer first data, if I'm going to use a branded Klaviyo term. I can see the smile over there. And there's like some awesome brands that are doing that. Hunter Gather, one of our other UK customers, was able to increase their revenue on email flows using Klaviyo, of course, by 258%. And like 1 out of 5 people converted to customers. Joe's Road Beauty switched their Facebook ad spend to TikTok and was able to use that plus a quiz to make 7 figures. You probably heard a lot about this case study. Definitely go read it. If you haven't, seriously, that I have heard that change a lot of people's lives. And then one of the brands we'll talk about, this amazing brand, Coral Smith, that I hear this great agency worked with to help them get hundreds of thousands of email subscribers and build them. We might just dive deeper into that. I think one of the Phils might know something about that. I hear a scratching of the head there. And so, there's just a lot of stuff that's been like happening. And there's like a lot of ways to be, there's a lot of challenges that have happened in the last year for e-commerce brands. But I really do believe the brands that embrace zero party data now are going to be really huge brands and be the ones who differentiate from like their customers. So that's all I wanted to say on that front to kind of introduce everything. But if you're like interested in like getting started and all that, and like making actually, I will say one other thing, which is like the future of marketing is not going to be some kind of spam and hit. It's going to be an opt-in kind of thing, being able to opt into everything. And so marketing will get more diversified as a result of that. Now, if you want to get started, you can, request a demo from us, go and like see our quiz product. Maybe a lot of you are customers. If you're not, feel free to go and talk. But some of you are agencies out there, and we have one amazing one we're going to talk with. And so I'm going to actually let Olivia, one of our partner managers, talk a little bit about that. And like our partner program, if you haven't ever heard about it before, great for stores who are trying to figure out like to get this built faster. If you want to get started, having a partner that can do it, and for agencies to be able to do source revenue. Olivia, are you here?
I am. Can you guys see me, hear me?
Yes, hello. Come join.
Hey everyone, thanks for coming today. I'm Olivia. I am the agency partner manager over here. We really started Octane, the Octane Partner Program in 2018 to help e-commerce agencies gain new customers, grow their businesses, and be really successful with Octane AI. Basically how we do it, so we work with our top agencies like Past Digital and a lot more, but basically like one, like we really want to make sure that they get any training they need to harness everything that Octane can do. And then two, help them create services on top of Octane. So like quiz building and Klaviyo email personalization, which one of the Phils will talk about today, and then help their clients with quiz builds and optimization too. So anything that they really need to be successful, like that's when we come in. So we do now have over 200 agencies in the program, and it's growing super rapidly. So if you are part of an agency and want to get started or want to deepen like our existing partnership, just shoot me an email, Olivia at Octane AI, and then I will drop it in the chat as well. But yeah, I'll pass it back over to Ben.
Thank you, Olivia. I appreciate you coming up and giving everyone some insight into our partner program, which is a huge backbone of not just like what we do at Octane, but also a real essential partner to a lot of our customers for building amazing quizzes and building amazing Klaviyo flows. So speaking of that, let's get to the heart of everything, which is I'm going to bring up a couple of friends. I am not named Phil. Maybe I could just change my name into that.
It's a good name.
Apparently Phil's an excellent name. So if you're named Phil and you're in the audience, let me know. I might bring you up for,
we won't get into the discussion whether it's.
I was gonna swear for a second. I should probably avoid lots of swearing. I might swear a little bit. So I'm going to start this by having the Phils introduce themselves and what they do. And then I think first I want to after that, have Phil Hansen talk a little bit about what you've been doing with Octane AI with some of your customers, especially, one of our Star Mutual customers, Curl Smith. But maybe let's start with some introductions and we'll go from there. So which Phil wants to go first?
I'll go first, Phil. How's that sound? So first off, thanks so much, Ben, for having me on, and obviously really excited. This is a great conversation. I'd love to kind of hear our partners talk about their experience with Klaviyo, but even more importantly, I think any of these discussions we have in e-commerce, they naturally revolve around the wider ecosystem. So these type of things really get me jazzed up. So for a lot of people, I'm seeing a few familiar names, some that I haven't met before. My name is Phil Greenwood. I'm a team lead on our partnerships team. I've been with Klaviyo for coming up on 4 years now, which is wild. And I met Ben at our first customer conference when we were about a 300 person company. And obviously fast forward to today, 1,500 employees globally and a really strong partner program working with thousands of agencies globally, which is incredible. So I'm really excited, like I said, to not only get to talk with one of my favorite Phils in the world. Phil is a very ubiquitous name in e-commerce for obvious reasons, I'm assuming. But obviously just talk through what we've been able to do together in our partnership. So really excited to be here. And so thanks again, Octane, for inviting us on.
So I'll follow up from that. So I'm Phil Manson, founder of Past Digital. I'm Phil spelt correctly with 2 L's, as you'll notice in the screen. So got to get that little jibe in. My background is email marketing. I spent 9 years working tech side, and then just coming up 3 years now running Past Digital. First met and worked with Phil August 2019, something along those lines. Fast forward now, I think we've just been announced as the first elite master partner in EMEA. I've got to get that little plug in there. But really working with Klaviyo and partners such as Octane to really drive the value of data. So it's not just about sending more emails, it's about using the data to drive more relevant communications so that makes the right message, right customer, right time much more scalable.
I love the Phil introductions. I am Ben Parr, not Phil. I just changed my name. So Phil, let's talk a little bit about what you're actually what you're doing, because I kind of briefly hinted at one of the case studies, but talk to me talk to everyone a little bit, and maybe even if you're willing to screen share a little bit about what you're doing on the data side, why the data is so important, and how you're helping collect and leverage that data. I know it's a long question, but I know you're an expert at this.
That's open-ended. I could talk for hours about this. So As
Good.
as I alluded to earlier, my background is enterprise, so working with the likes of Avis Car Rental across Europe. So really what we focus on as an organization is to try to bring that enterprise level marketing activity and focus on data down to direct to consumer brands that may be owner led, or they're looking for sort of that first round of private equity investment. And what that means is we're not just looking to fill boxes and use automated activity that's pre-canned. So we're looking at what's the data telling us? Where are the data gaps? So do we know enough about someone to make a decision, or do we need to go and ask them? And I think that's where our partnership with Octane is coming so well. Is I liken you walk into a shop and you don't know what you're trying to buy there. And a shop assistant comes up to you and asks you a series of questions and really guides you through a journey. Now, you can't do that online, but what you can do online is remove the gap between an email address and a purchase. And now, currently, you may have an email address and you may have that email address plus a purchase, but you don't know whether they've brought the right product for them. Where we're using Octane and other data sources is to try to almost create that concierge to bring people through a story and a series of questions that really drills down and builds the right response for them. So it might be, widget A or product B or whatever it may be, but you're really helping people, and that value exchange becomes key. So it's not just about saying, here's 10% off your first order. It's like, how can we help you? And by the way, if you want, here's 10% off your first order. But you're really offering some people advice in exchange for a piece of data, which in this case is their email address or their mobile phone number. And that then becomes so key, as you alluded to earlier on your zero party, is that we need that identifier. We want the brand to own that identifier, not a Facebook, not an Apple, not a Google. We want the brand to own that data. And what we're seeing over the last sort of 24 months is, when we're talking to private equity companies and we're looking at with them at brands that they're looking at investing in, they're looking at how much own data does that business have. They're not looking at how much they're making on Facebook or how much they're making on TikTok. They are looking at how many people have we got in the database that we can market to? What do we know about them? How many people have purchased once, twice, 3 times? And how can we use automated programs and campaigns and relevant personalized content to really drive that lifetime value? So really is about putting that power back in the brand's hand. And that's what we do as a business. So we're not a business that goes in and says, you should have this, this, and this, and cookie cutter. We're doing a piece of analysis. We're understanding that brand, their customers, their gaps, and saying, you don't need to go straight into deep level personalization. You need to fix these holes first. And if you fix these holes in this way, you'll be answering some of those questions that will fill some of those gaps further down the line as well. People are nodding, but
Have a video and nod, or use the emojis and the magic.
Any questions?
I have many questions. So I want to start with I know that you worked on this one. Am I correct?
That's one of ours.
So I think there's a couple things that I hear from all of the brands. One is how do I collect more zero party data? But a big one, and this is a big one, is how do I get more email subscribers? I'm gonna ask both of you, since you are both experts at that. So I'm a brand. I want to get more email subscribers that convert. How do I collect more subscribers? Does that just be a little bit of the quiz, by the way, but just give us some insight and how we can build our list. I think you're muted, Phil.
Someone got fed up with me.
Double Phil.
Someone got upset with me and muted me, or I did it myself, one of the two. I think there's two sides. One is, once you've got people onto your site, it's making sure that you've optimized data capture across all the touch points. So checkout, footer, pop-up, but also think about how can you use other channels to drive traffic through to the site. You can have the greatest pop-up in the world or quiz, but if you're not getting the traffic volumes through to the site, you're never going to grow the subscriber base. What Curlsmith were very good at doing was actually using Facebook ad spend to drive people through to that quiz. So they were using other channels to drive data in. So they took an investment up front to get traffic through to the site, with that concierge piece in mind of, we can help you if you're here.
Super awesome. Phil, other Phil. God, this is gonna be a thing. Phil G. I'm gonna think of different names. Single letter. Single, yes. what are some ways that you see like your partners and some top Klaviyo customers like building their email list? Any tips, any advice? Like we're getting right into it for everyone here.
Absolutely. No, I think, to keep it simple and actionable in some ways, I think a lot of it comes down to just testing and keeping that front and center in any new strategy and any new acquisition channel, whether it's Facebook, driving traffic to the site, or even just testing out a new channel for communicating, right? So for us, obviously having, SMS as an offering, that's a big opportunity for some brands to test it out and see if there's a way to engage with customers where they want to be, in touch with us and how they want to interact with us. I love that analogy Phil used on like the storefront and how you can come out from behind the desk and ask questions, get to know somebody. That's the kind of experience that you're trying to replicate, but it's going to look different depending on what type of store you're going into. If you're going to buy a new pair of shoes or try some new cosmetics, those type of experiences you'd expect in person are very different. So you should try to kind of match those up and test out different ideas. So I think the forums and obviously just information gathering, don't cannibalize your growth and your list growth by doing too much, but keep it simple, have some purpose, and really drive home what type of value you're trying to bring as soon as you introduce these new ideas. Don't just do it for the sake of testing, do it with some purpose. And obviously, being data driven is the key there so that you can make those decisions work over time.
I think the other thing, just as we're talking, that springs to mind is certainly when we're thinking about zero-party data, and it's not just the email addresses, it's appending data to that record. So if you've got existing data, using something like the quiz to go back to the existing database and ask those questions and link people through, you're really re-engaging them with the brand. At the same time, you're gathering that first-party or zero-party data at the same time. So I think don't just think about this piece of work as an acquisition element. It can be retention as well, because really you can go back through that existing base and really add value to that.
Let's talk a little bit about that, like retention. I have a lot of questions on the quiz side. We'll go through it in a minute, but we've got Klaviyo here. I'd like to hear about like some of the best practices that you have in terms of building Klaviyo flows that really help capture and retain, since we're talking about retention, like retention strategies, especially when it comes to using Klaviyo, using data that you're getting from the quiz. What are you seeing that works or doesn't work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so obviously, the expert on the call is Phil number, I'll call him Phil number one for his sake. But obviously, I think from what we see, a lot of it is kind of starts at one of our core kind of pillars is really just the data that we can collect, store, and analyze pretty easily. And so having the ability to ingest data, not only from the quizzes that we're pulling in data from, but also you've got your website, the different transactions that are happening there, other resources other kind of integrations that you're working with, whether it's a support desk or reviews, a lot of different sources that we've got to work with. So Klaviyo is in a good position because we do have these integrations right there. And for the most part, they're pretty straightforward and easy to use out of the box. And as part of that, you get to take advantage of the types of experiences that we built for e-commerce brands front and center. So thinking about flows in particular, having some of the work, the heavy lifting done for you out of the box so that you can go in and then tweak these types of flows and the content, making them more personal and using this data to create more value for customers. So thinking about if somebody's left a negative or positive review, there's either end of it really. How are you going to then react and create a better experience as soon as they go to their abandoned cart flow? Are you going to follow up with them the same way if they've had a great experience or even a bad experience? But these are all data points that you should be leveraging in your flows to make them feel a bit more personal and just know how people want to communicate with you too. So introducing, kind of like we talked about or mentioned briefly, the different channels that somebody might be a bit more receptive to, whether it's email or SMS, all these things fit into your flow strategy because they're right there and you can test them pretty easily. So you should be keeping those, again, front and center in your strategy and keep iterating on that over time so you can make the most of it.
Yeah, I think I'd add to that put the customer front and center. So the customer's got to be central to everything you're doing. So don't just send an email or an SMS because you've got a message you think is important. Think about what the customer feels is important. One of the old analogies, without going down that route again, is I wouldn't like to receive that. We send too many emails. Test, understand what your customer is saying back through the feedback loops, the unsubscribe rates, and really the biggest well, a couple of the biggest opportunities or challenges we see when we audit Klaviyo setups or brands that we now work with is that core database structure is quite often not quite right. Look to try and centralize all the data into a single list, make use of custom properties to be able to highlight where they've come from, rather than having people that sign up through a pop-up join a list who then go through the checkout and sign up to a different list, which triggers different welcome series and messaging, which is very confusing to the end user who thinks they've signed up to one brand. So really that audit of automations is really key, and that deduplication between those flows as well, so that you're not triggering multiple journeys at the same time. And really then the next level is to start using those custom properties to trigger dynamic content. So you're changing the messaging based on that parameter. So again, a little bit more upfront work for the marketeer, but so much more valuable as throughput when you go through it. So right time, right customer, right message.
How do you pick on we were talking about email and SMS, and so there's lots of channels you can go communicate with them. I'm curious for of how the decision making of I should collect an email, or I should collect a phone number, or I should send an email, or I should send a phone number, or how should I go and sequence that? I'm curious, Double L Phil, first, how you think about that with all the brands that you work with.
Yeah, there's no one size fits all answer to that, which sounds like the wishy-washy sales answer, but it's true. And I think it comes down to learning. Certainly in the UK market, SMS is a much more naive space. I think it's fair to say. I think it's much more accepted in the stateside. In the UK, it's a newer thing. So there's a lot of brands looking at it, but don't have the database sizes to do it. So it's going to complement email to start with, rather than being separate processes. But again, it comes down to, you don't want that. I can't remember if people remember the Amazon experience a few years ago, where you brought something on the app, you got an app notification say your order had been placed, you got a text message say your order had been placed, and you got an email all at the same time. So again, it's about looking at those customer preferences to say, well, actually, we know this customer doesn't open email, so we're going to send them the SMS because they're opted in, and vice versa, and really starting to look through that positioning to say, where does this work? Where can we position it? If we end up with a segment of customers that respond to SMS but don't respond to email, well, there's a given priority there for the SMS channel over email. I certainly think for some brands it does come down to an element of cost as well, around, well, how do you track and monitor those returns? So it's that full end-to-end, right message, right customer, and at the right price.
Have you seen anything single LFL in terms of how you see your Klaviyo customers and partners balancing the two channels?
Yeah, definitely. I think, as Phil mentioned, it is down to what the customer, what their customer base looks like at the end of the day. So what do they know about customer preferences in terms of communication? For a lot of brands, it is a way to kind of quickly test it out. And if you're gathering text message, SMS, and just making sure you're creating some type of value with that, so that there's something there. I mean, it's not just for vanity's sake that you should be gathering phone numbers. There should be some incentive to really take that first step. And then you can start to think about it as a brand. Are we trying to just send promotional updates, just general updates, order confirmations, transactional updates of that nature? I mean, I think that's obviously a big place for brands to test out SMS. And it's, generally speaking, as soon as somebody's actually opted in for it, it's a really powerful channel, because it's an opt-in only channel, really. You can't just blast your whole list if they haven't given you consent. For carrier reasons, for a lot of different compliance reasons, that's the case. And I think that's a great part of SMS. That is purely opt-in. Or are you going to start to go a bit more of an omni-channel route and really give customers that preference on what type of messages they'd like to receive from you and in which channel? So if people want to receive specific type of updates about new products, new features, new updates about the brand, I mean, if SMS is the channel that they're more engaged with, then great. I don't think there's anything there stopping you from testing it out. And part of the beauty of having it, and not to be a bit too salesy, but part of the beauty of having it under one umbrella with us is that you can test that out for very low risk or low cost, even just to build that list, have it in the forms, and at the end of the day, figure out what's going to work for you and your customers over time, which is, I think, really exciting for them to test themselves.
Let's talk about a specific example on this zero-party data journey. And I think you can guess, Double L Phil, which example I'm going to bring up. And I want you to just talk a little bit about them and what you did and like the process of like, like getting their like everything from like, Crosswith getting their quiz set up to get to the Klaviyo flows, because there's some very interesting numbers here that we should definitely talk about, but we'll get to that in a second. But do you want to talk a little bit through what you did with Curlsmith? And while you do that, I may or may not just have the Curlsmith quiz just up in the background. You could even tell me, actually, before we do that, tell me about what you like about the Curlsmith quiz, why it's performing so well.
Oh, I think one of the reasons it's performing well, and it's one of the biggest challenges of getting the quiz to where it is today, and I hadn't realized this because I don't have curly hair, is how complex the number of products and complementary, and you can have product A and product B together, but you can't have product A and product C together. It's a minefield. So to go back to my shopkeeper analogy, someone's coming in and you're leading people through that path to the right product. And you touched on the results, which we'll come on to, which are very strong. I think to kind of cover how we built the quiz. We've been working with Curlsmith for a couple of years now. We know the brand. We know how their journey's gone on. What we were trying to do, and the use case we were trying to fill, was how do we create that concierge? How do we really narrow down that product offering for people that don't know the brand, may have seen it on a store in a shop, but don't know which product they need to buy and why they should buy it. As we got into that build process, it became very clear, as you can see on the screen there are lots of different needs for curly hair. My glamorous assistant there. So actually, it became quite a complex build, and really we start at the bottom of the tree. So we're starting with the answers, those personas we want to build. So rather than maybe being 4 or 5, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but there's a lot of personas there to create those answer pages that you're going to come through as you go through. What we found and what we've used that data for is A, it helped conversion. B, it helped drive that sign up to, I think it was 100,000 in 7 months, which is huge. Again, going back to the earlier point, that's driven through email traffic, organic traffic to the site, and some paid for media spend with Facebook to promote the quiz. But what we've got is we've got 100,000 incremental new subscribers, but 180,000 people have gone through the quiz. So we've got 80,000 of the existing subscribers have gone back through, completed that quiz, and given us persona level data about themselves. So we now know in Klaviyo who they are, what their preferences are, or what their required products are. We can then build segments off that to trigger relevant comms, and we're using that to then trigger more emails off the back through Klaviyo. We're using it to drive that content, product recommendations, and it's had a massively positive impact on the overall results. The other thing that we have done is, and I think we've tested this quite early on, is use the API to trigger a results-based email. So there's an email that's triggered off the back of someone completing the quiz. At the last count, that was contributing approximately 3% of their total digital revenue in a given month. So the people that are going through that quiz are seeing the email and then converting and buying, which is phenomenal, really. You quite often see people going through just to get a 10% off. The fact is they're going through and buying, and they're buying the products that are recommended for them.
I want to point out for this one, and then I have another question for you in a second, but like, look at that, like results page, like the education part comes first. Like, actually, I've learned a lot, like working with a lot of like hair care companies, and like, there's so many different types of like curly hair and different typings. And you can see here, like, Curlsmith is educating on like what the hair care routine should look like. Here's step 1, I can add it to cart. Step 2, can add, the Vivid Tones Vibrancy shampoo to cart. Step 3, can add the Glowing Perfect conditioner cart. I kind of want to do this now. Step 4, I don't have hair though, just so you don't know. And step 4, multitasking conditioner. And then look at the moisturizer, like a whole like step-by-step process. And I can add all the steps to cart too through everything. So just wanted to show everyone what this looks like. Question. Any tips that you have for increasing the conversions of a quiz, making it more engaging, collecting more data, using this guided shopping experience, let's call it, actually, because it's more than a quiz.
Interestingly, we had a stronger result using a Klaviyo pop-up to drive people through to the embedded quiz page rather than using a pop-up quiz. And I think it's down to the level of information that's served on those pages of the quiz, that from a UX perspective, it wasn't maybe as clear as it is on the embedded page, or maybe people were coming backwards and forwards. So we saw a higher conversion through the quiz using the embedded page rather than the pop-up, which I think is quite an interesting stat, just as a test. So again, that's how you know, an A/B test on the source of that initial touch point may be a good test to run versus, you know, should the font size be 12 or 14? That's, you know, and working on through some fairly big champion versus challenger opportunities at that point.
Question, I guess, you know, both of you can probably answer this one. It's like, are there like other things that brands should be thinking about, all the brands that are here, for how they could better leverage the data they're collecting from their quizzes for more personalized email and SMS flows? Anything that they should be thinking about or asking or doing?
Yeah, I mean, from my side, it's dependent on brand and number of products, but certainly think about personas that you believe you've got, and maybe go out and ask, you know, your customer base who they are to start with. So can you identify that Phil with 2 L's is, you know, getting close to 40, Phil with 1 L is getting close to 30, and he's got different requirements for hair, etc., whatever it may be. But build out that so that you can then build out maybe 4 to 6 personas, start broad, build the questions that will filter people into those pots, and then go from there. One of the challenges we see, and this comes back to not only quizzes, but also, I think Phil will attest to this with email, is trying to go from 0 to 100 overnight. Start broad, working commercially viable segments that are quite broad. So maybe go from, I don't know, if you've got 1,000 people in the database, go to 2 segments of 500 to start with, and then go down that way, rather than trying to do 10 different segments to start with. So start broad, learn the results, look at the results that are coming through, and then refine as you go through it. One of the things I'd love to test, and I think this could be something quite interesting, is almost to build multiple quizzes based on the results of the first quiz. So actually start to push people through an email series into a more detailed secondary quiz that offers a bit more refinement. So it's broad, get people in. The idea here at the top of the funnel is to capture the email address and some top line data, and then potentially based on those results, offer a second quiz as part of an email series or SMS series that really then adds more profile information that you can use for other targeting.
Go if you had something else to add, but by the way, double L Phil, I didn't ask you this before, I should have, but if you happen to have like any of the like email flow work that you have that you could like screen share or show, well, that would be awesome too. But I also know that might be a last minute thing, because I didn't actually ask you to do that. And
without approval from the client, I'd struggle.
Yeah, that we don't want to go into that. See, that's really important. I want to like actually ask like a different one, because we have a European themed edition here, and so a lot of times, you know, like probably like by the way, like I'm curious like which country you're all based out of, everyone who's in the chat. Like if you're US, you're Europe, you're a different place. But you know, a lot of the brands here are marketing different countries. Shopify and Klaviyo allow you to market internationally. But are there different things that you have to think about when it comes to marketing and selling into different countries with like the brands that you work with, or with like your Klaviyo flows, for example? This is a question for either Phil or both Phils.
I think for me, it's GDPR is the big one, and PECA, so the Privacy Electronic Communication Regulation. I think most brands are aware of it now in Europe. I think it's fair to say, Phil. Most are not trying to fly too close to the wire. I think they're really taking it on board. If anything, some brands are playing it too safe, and have gone down the we can't do this versus understanding the difference in the UK, certainly between legitimate interest and consent-based marketing. And I think there's an education piece there. Soft opt-in versus, you know, not allowed to have pre-tick boxes, etc., etc. I think I would always try to obviously be legal, but push the boundaries as much as you can, because I think if you play too safe, you get left behind.
Yeah, echoing what Phil has said, I think that's obviously a big focus for us in terms of making sure customers have the right guidance recommendations. And a lot of times it really just starts with, hey, if you have legal counsel, that's where you should start with a lot of these discussions. Another element to it, I think I've found is, you know, each region, each market, even within the UK, is incredibly unique in how they, you know, perceive your products, like to be communicated with. So putting an emphasis on updating your copy as soon as you launch into a new market, as soon as you start to understand a little bit more about your customer base, take that information and actually, you know, put it into action by updating your flows, updating your campaigns, and being really deliberate with the type of things you want to know more about. You might find that in certain regions, products are performing better than others. Sometimes it's going to surprise marketers, and what they might expect to be their, you know, their champion product in a new region might not be the case. So I think looking at the data holistically is a big part to that. But obviously, as for brands that may be expanding for the first time into Europe, it's a very different place than you may have expected. In some cases, it can be completely different on where you see results. And same thing for brands that are thinking about going into the US market for the first time. Ad spend is incredibly cheap. More expensive. It's really competitive. And this is
the opposite, Phil.
It's opposite. It's going to be.
You've been
really
in the UK too long
to break into it. Yeah. So when you start to think about, you know, getting into the new market in the US, it can be a bit of a, you know, a challenge for brands who aren't ready for it. So having those channels established early and having the brand, having the messaging, and having a strategy on how you can kind of stay ahead of that is, you know, it's probably not gonna change how much you probably expect to pay. It's probably going to be more than you expect, but there's still ways to get around that if you're smart about it and if you understand what type of data you're working with and how you can leverage that across other channels.
Yeah, I think a prime example of that, Phil, is, you know, the cart versus basket abandonment. The UK market doesn't understand what cart is. The US doesn't understand what a basket is. So it's worth having that localization view. And the other side is, to Phil's point, as you expand into other markets, you don't need to replicate like for like what you're doing. So if you've got a basket abandonment email series with 6 emails in the US and you're going into the UK, I'd probably only activate the first one to start with. When you've only got 1,000 people in the database, you're better to cover all of the touch points quickly and initially just with a single email, and then expand out as the data grows. So don't spend, we can't launch until we've got 10 emails in the series ready to go. Get going, learn fast, adapt, and then add to it as you go through.
I had not even thought about cart versus basket, but that I had heard it, but I had to think like, oh, actually being able to change it if you can is pretty great. And also, I guess, like, Carl Smith's site, for example, ask which country you're in, and I think it changes stuff of that.
So it triggers them off to different Shopify stores as well. So that's the other thing, is just to the nuances of language. You can be a little bit more aggressive sometimes in your language in certain markets versus others. Sometimes those literal direct translations don't work. So I highly recommend getting some local resource, even on a temporary basis, just to maybe do some direct, translations to, we've all seen those automated translations on Chinese products that really don't translate properly into the English language. It's not quite that bad, but it's definitely worth just checking. So
we have just a little over 10 minutes. The time really flies. So anyone in the audience, you have a burning question, speak up now or put it in the chat so that we can answer your questions, because it's all about you and all the work that you're doing. But I have a couple more questions before anyone else gets their questions in, which is particularly for Couple L, Phil. I remember meeting you in person years ago. It was sunny, it was lovely, we had some great food. But you would talk to me about building this agency business from a couple people to how many people do you have now?
I think we're 17 in total at the moment.
You have 17 people. You're managing multi-million-dollar brands. Just maybe even especially we have a couple, a bunch of people who have agencies or want to build agencies, how you built a great, $1 million agency business, how did you do that? Very, very simple question.
Oh yeah, no, yeah. If we could bottle this as an answer, it'd be great. I think for me, and I mean, Phil's smiling there. I've known Phil for a good number of years now, from the very early days where I'd never even heard of Klaviyo. I think there's a couple of things here. One is we as a business decided very early on we weren't going to go and be a Shopify agency that did a bit of email, or we wanted to be a specialist. So my background is data, marketing automation, email. So we picked email. It started as a, I suppose, a consultancy. It was supposed to be a lifestyle business. It was never supposed to get to this stage. Well, I'm very pleased it has, but it was never designed to be this. And we listen, we talk to people, and we understand what's going on in the market. We talk to brands. We have a very slick process now in terms of what we do and how we work with brands that's been evolved over the last couple of years. But really the most important thing is we're listening to a brand, and we're not adverse to telling a brand we're not the right fit and say, look, you're not ready for us, or we can't help you, go and talk to these people. And the other thing is, I think we've been very fortunate that Klaviyo have had a fantastic couple of years, and we've probably ridden those coattails, it's fair to say, in the UK market coming in quite early on. I think when I first started talking to Phil, he wasn't even in the UK. So we've ridden the coattails of Klaviyo, but we've done it because it's a good platform. It works really, really well and effectively for the brands we're looking for. And having worked for a marketing tech business, I can't believe how open and transparent as an organization they are in terms of how much data you can access against the customer, where you can start plugging other APIs in very, very effectively. So actually it becomes a natural fit for a lot of companies to start going, well, actually we'll use Klaviyo to amalgamate and group those data points together, but we're not stuck in an old legacy ecosystem. So we're not buying a legacy platform where if I bought their email, I need to use their SMS. We can start to plug best of breed where we need to. And I think for me, as I say, I go back to listening to customers. It's understanding customers. It's really quite often driving them forward to say, yes, you've got 10% year-on-year growth, but it could be 30, 40, 50, even 100%. And this is how we do it. And the proof is in the numbers. So we don't do long-term contracts. It's all about results. So you're buying into an agency with that experience, but are also going to put their neck on the line. So, well, if it doesn't work, we part ways. So it's that, and it's a very similar model to Klaviyo actually in a way, because you're in monthly rolling. If it's not working for you, you move on.
We have a question from the audience. I actually see. What is your perfect client, Double Phil? What do you look for?
Our perfect client is probably a growing business, either private equity backed or going into that first round of private equity, or an owner-led brand that's knocking on that door. So they've scaled up with our fee structure now. Ideally we want 50 to 100,000 plus of email addresses, because that's how we can drive the most value and benefit. But we're looking for those brands, and actually quite often it's a people fit. We've quite often spoken to smaller brands and said, look, realistically, you're not the right fit for us. However, what we can do is this, and this, and do a smaller project, and then keep in touch with us and work with them over a 6-month period, ad hoc rather than on a monthly retainer. But it's a people fit and a size fit to a certain extent as well. And it's brands that are happy to be challenged. The worst client is a brand that brings you on because you're the experts, and then won't take on board what you're saying because they're too entrenched in the brand to really say, well, actually, that's not the right message to send to the customer at that time, because they're looking at it going, well, this is the most important message for us to send. And it's circling back to say, no, we need to put the customer at the center of this comms. So the best customers are ones that are fast growing, they're willing to learn, they're willing to be challenged, optimize. The worst ones are the ones where they're too engrossed in their own space, and they're although they want the experts and they're paying for the experts, they don't really want to then listen because it's challenging them on what they've built already.
By the way, Double L Phil, I've heard that you may be offering and building a new service, helping brands with quizzes and zero-party data.
Well, we thought we might get involved in that a little bit.
I was just gonna ask, why? And how did you think about why you're going to start to offer that?
Okay, so I think it comes down to the data, and I think Phil and I were chatting the other night over a beer, as you do, that quite often you buy a SaaS product and you've brought the product. So you've brought, I don't know, a subscription service, you brought an email marketing service, you brought you bought the tool, but you don't know how to configure it. You don't know what questions it should be asking you. You don't know what questions to ask it. So what we're wanting to do is really accelerate that piece of activity from buying a quiz-based service and getting it live. And it comes down to us being able to ask the questions that challenges the brand. Say, well, what are we trying to get out of this? What are your personas that we're trying to answer the queries for? And really then we're just trying to facilitate that whole and speed up that process, because actually what we want to do is get more brands to the point where the Curlsmith level of 100,000 subscribers as quickly and as effectively as possible. And having done it multiple times and worked with your fantastic team, Ben, as well, you start to understand the pitfalls and the workarounds and the tweaks you need to make to get to market a lot more effectively and a lot quicker. And you can almost not, in Klaviyo's space, we can almost pre-can some best practice to say that this is a starting point and optimize from there. So for us, it's about how do we start to challenge in this space with quizzes, say, look, this is best practice. This is a starting point to build you a baseline. And then how do we do champion versus challenger to really optimize that quiz for you as an individual brand moving forwards?
Single L Phil. We've been talking about building amazing agency businesses and building awesome services. And by the way, anyone out there, before I even continue, with Double L Phil, like if they want to contact you, like I really need to get a quiz built, how do they contact you? How do they get started?
You can visit the website www.pass, which is paase.co.uk, or find us on LinkedIn. And between myself and Andy or one of the commercial team, we'll be able to have a conversation, work out what you need, and come up with some sort of a scope of works.
All right, my two last questions, unless someone else comes with another one. Oh yes, Andy, you got to mention Single L Phil, or I should just, why am I doing Phil G? We've been talking about like how you like build, like your job is to help these agencies grow and like become like awesome businesses. So how does someone become a top Klaviyo partner? Like, is there a common thread between them? Is there something that you're seeing? How, if someone's like, I'm going to start an agency, how would they, grow into something like Pass?
Absolutely.
Oh, this will be good.
I don't know how detailed we get. No, I think it's really, I love talking about this because when I started, we were a small team. I think we obviously saw the value of agencies, but there really wasn't much beyond the referral and the initial, maybe the lead sharing piece was probably the only really meaningful interaction at that time. And I think what we've done over the past 4 years is build a program that acknowledges we work with a lot of different types of agencies. So we have two distinct tracks. One focused with past team has really done a fantastic job with the master's program. Taking not only a chance on Klaviyo as a business to have a service offering, but going a step further and pushing the product and making sure that we can continue to learn from our customers, which are our agencies. How can they help us make a better program? How can they help us learn more about ways we can support them with enablement, resources, training materials? So those types of opportunities, they don't happen overnight. And I think what we've seen, or what I've seen personally with Phil and his team, is that they are very willing to kind of push us and help us learn. And I think as a result, we've been able to scale that up to a really impressive program working with thousands of agencies globally. And these are covering agencies across APAC, EMEA, the Americas. And that in itself is pretty incredible. So I think that's kind of the North Star, is getting those type of agencies to not only see the product as it is and obviously feel really comfortable recommending it, but going a step further and having a really, a successful business as an agency and a business owner to see how you can continue to scale that team up. The other end of it, which I'll spend a bit of time.
Sorry,
go ahead.
I'm just going to add to that because I think it's important that there's not many organizations, let alone in the US, across globally of the size Klaviyo is, that would have partner advisory councils where individuals like myself, globally, I think there's 10 of us globally worldwide. God, it's been a long day. 10 of us globally that have access to senior members of the Klaviyo leadership team can give frank feedback back, and it's listened to and actioned. I can't think of another business that would do that. You know, if we think about, say, a MailChimp or I don't know, a Dot Digital, it just wouldn't happen. It would just be a pipeline of dreams and requirements. The fact is, Klaviyo, I think from the top down, breeds this same kind of willingness and community, and I think that's really, you know, a key part of its success.
Wow, I didn't expect this to get a love fest so quickly.
Well,
I didn't plant that, by the way. I didn't plant that.
It's true.
Yeah, no, and it does go to, and I know this is something, you know, whether it's our product or culturally how we think about things, but learning is core to a lot of what we do at Klaviyo. I think that, like Phil said, I think it comes from a lot of different areas of the business, and that's exciting. I think that shows that we're trying to get better, which we had our kind of first EMEA partner day last week. And I think what I was really excited about is talking about how we're getting better, how we're investing, how we're continuing to learn. And it can't just be, you know, a product roadmap. It's got to come from a lot of different areas of our business in order to really make that impact. And so, yeah, I think that's hopefully, you know, what Phil's seeing and talking about here.
Phil G, very quickly, someone wants to become a Klaviyo partner. Where do they go?
Go to klaviyo.com and there is a partner page. I'm going to link it here so that everybody can see it. And I'll get you set up. So we have an onboarding program for new agencies. So if anybody wants to go here, it's a longer URL from the rebrand. So I didn't want to try to get to that. But go to klaviyo.com. We've got a partner page on there. We've got a directory of fantastic agencies available. Pass will be right at the top. They're a featured partner this month. But we have got a really streamlined partner program, an onboarding program in particular. We can get set up with training, enablement, a demonstration of the platform, and all the resources that you need to be successful. So please take us up on that. And this team is global now. So we've got a team in Australia that's picking up a lot of really good stuff. So yeah, take us up on that opportunity.
All right, we're at time. I have one last question. Before I do that, octaneai.com/partners. You want to do our partner program. Well, obviously, a lot of OctaneAI's partners are Klaviyo partners, and they go hand in hand, as you have learned from the last hour here. If you haven't already signed up for like next week's community meetup, octaneai.com/community, I already know who's going to be on next week. It's two amazing e-commerce founders and operators of an awesome e-commerce brand. You won't want to miss it. We'll announce it later this week, early next week. And then, of course, like you haven't started Octane, octaneai.com/demo. You're like, I need to probably go do a quiz. You go do that, and you go talk to this guy, and you go talk to this guy, and then you go print money. Last question, and then we got to wrap it up because I know everyone's got things to do. One last piece of advice for the entrepreneurs out there, or the operators out there. Just one thing that comes to mind that you want to like pass on to everyone who's listening.
Take a risk. Fail fast if you're going to fail, but take a risk. I think this business was built out of taking that first step, and the first step is the hardest. If you think you can do it and you want to do it and you've got the passion to do it. And the other piece of advice is listen. I think listen to people, network, and we've built a business on being able to talk to people and listen to what they're saying. So yeah, listen, network, and have fun. God, have fun with it.
Sure.
I could top that. Yeah, I would just say keep it even shorter. You know, take advantage, reach out to Pass. You know, that's a great tip for today. If there's anything here, work with Octane, work with Pass. I think there's a lot of value in this, and I think a lot of the people on this session probably, if they're not already doing so, take time to figure out how amazing this ecosystem is. There are just so many different parts of e-commerce that I love every day. Just the fact that there's so much collaboration, there's so many open discussions happening at any given time, and hopefully this is it's still early days on how much better it's going to get in the future. So I think that's my only tip. Just take advantage of the fact that we've got an amazing ecosystem, and there's still so much more that we can all do for each other.
I feel like that's a perfect way. And now, Deesh, I see your oh my goodness, see the questions already. I think you might have to go. We might have to have another session where we talk about all the other differences. I only let you do one other one, Phil. Any other differences between US and UK? Some language thing, just for fun fact.
Language, so spellings of colour and tomato and all the usual stuff that we won't say who's right and who's wrong on this call, because I think I'll get beaten down. The other thing is to focus is opt-in. So generally, basket abandonment, browser are all considered marketing messages to make sure you're applying email opt-in to those series. It's a bit of a grey area over here in the UK, but play safe. make sure people are opted in when you're sending those messages.
I will leave it at that. So Phil, all the Phils, thank you so much for joining this week's community meetup. Everyone, make sure to RSVP for next week's. Put it in your calendar, put it every week, same time, same place on the internet. We'd love to hear it, see you. I know we have some super awesome guests coming over the next couple weeks, some super crazy things. Might even have a little bit of breakout, get to meet some of the other people who've been coming to the meetups next week. If you like that, come next week, come hang out. Thank you, Phils, for staying so late. Go and get yourself, I was going to say, actually, go get yourself an English breakfast for dinner. Because I think that's one thing we can all agree is delicious. So thank you all for coming. Thank you all for being here. We'll see you next week. Give us your feedback. Give us your advice. Come join us. Adios, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.